Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Do Hongyu. Coming up in this edition, Israel says its negotiating team has returned from Qatar after having what it calls meaningful talks for a deal to release the hostages held in Gaza. Residents of a war-ravaged neighborhood in eastern Damascus are returning home to check the conditions of their houses. An Azerbaijani passenger plane with 67 people on board has crashed near the Kazakh city of Aktau. We begin in the Middle East. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office says its negotiating team has returned from what it calls meaningful talks in Qatar for a deal to release the hostages held in Gaza. Jonathan Rijev has more from Tel Aviv.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a session of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, saying that progress has been made and a deal is closer, but there's still some time to go. He cannot elaborate on that. He does not know how long will it take. It sounds optimistic, but it also sounds familiar, as these are pretty much the same things we've heard last May and last July. Will it be different now? Perhaps. We do not know. What the families are saying, they're hoping, is that perhaps Donald Trump has more leverage on Israel, on Benjamin Netanyahu, than Joe Biden. Both presidents, and especially Trump, which has perhaps more leverage on Netanyahu, are interested in this deal. Does that mean that a deal will eventually happen? Absolutely not. We do not know that. We know that there is opposition from within the Israeli coalition, once again coming from far-right lawmakers, raised their opposition to previous deals, and they're doing the same now. If you ask many Israeli analysts, they will say that when Benjamin Netanyahu has to decide between the good of his coalition and the good of anything else, he will choose his coalition. What will it be this time? We'll have to wait and see.
That was Jonathan Rijev reporting. Meanwhile, Hamas says the safety of some captives largely depends on the activities of the Israeli army. The number of people killed by Israeli attacks on the Strip has surpassed 45,000. The Kamal Adwan hospital in northern Gaza remains in the crossfire. Rami Al-Magari has more from Han Yunis.
20 people have been reportedly injured at the Kamal Adwan hospital when the Israeli army, as reported, when the Israeli army hit the hospital, around the hospital, with some robot explosives. That's what has been reported, forcing the dwellers or those inside the hospital to leave immediately. And also the Al-Auda hospital in the northern Gaza Strip, in the Jabalia refugee camp, has been forced to leave the hospital. The Indonesian hospital, notably, has already evacuated. That's what has been reported, which is close to the Auda hospital in northern Gaza Strip. So the hospitals over there are defunctioning almost completely because of the intensity of the Israeli actions, and it seems the Israeli army does not want to see hospitals or population over there, as there have been reports about detonation and explosion of homes, destruction of more homes in the northern Jabalia refugee camp, and pictures from Jabalia show that most of the homes have been flattened and pounded to the ground over there. This is for the northern Gaza Strip. For the Gaza City, there was a strike in a home in which 4 people were killed in east of Gaza City. Another strike hit also some parts of the eastern Gaza City, in which 1 people was killed and 2 others injured, including a woman and a child. In the central Gaza Strip, actually, there was a strike on those guarding the shipments coming in the territory for the past few days. There was an action against those guards by the Israeli army. 5 people were killed, and the day before also 5 people were killed. And always Israel claims that these people are belonging to the Hamas, which Israel does not want to see after the war, as stated by the Israeli Prime Minister when he said recently that the war will continue until Hamas is removed totally and completely.
That was Rami Al-Magari reporting. Elsewhere in the Middle East, residents of a war-ravaged neighborhood in eastern Damascus are returning home to check the conditions of their houses. Haidar Kazwini visited the neighborhood to find out more.
We are now in Qaboon neighborhood, which lies in the eastern part of the capital Damascus. The scale of devastation here is huge. This neighborhood has seen many of its buildings destroyed and flattened to the ground. The Syrian military seized this neighborhood in 2018, and it remained barred since that time until the day of the toppling of the government. Now many residents decided to return to check the conditions of their houses or what remains of them. It's not easy to find any sign of life in this war-ravaged area. Most of the buildings have been reduced to rubble from years of fierce fighting between former Syrian military and Syrian rebels. The serenity is overwhelming. Even standing buildings are uninhabitable, marred by damage from bombs and bullet holes. This is Khadija's first time back in more than a decade. She's trying to send videos to her relatives to help her recognize the routes that lead to her family's house.
We do not have any financial capability to repair the damage. Bringing life back to normal here requires resources we do not have. I doubt that anyone who returns here can rejuvenate the area. For us, my husband works on basis on daily wage that enables us to make ends meet, but we do not have the means to repair our house.
Khadija has been meeting with other residents of Qabun to work together to locate where each other's homes used to be. 45-year-old Iyad has a good memory of how the neighborhood was before the war, but he has little hope in getting back to live in his family's house, given the scale of damage.
Near that house, there was an institute, and near it, there was your family's house, near that one there. There was a factory here. I could specify the route. Reaching there, there was an institute, and our house was to the right of the institute, but now it is a pile of rubble. The landmarks of the narrow alleys are completely erased.
Iyad and his wife have refused to bring their children to see the neighborhood's scars of conflict, but remain optimistic of a brighter future for them.
That was Haidar Kasrini reporting from Damascus. Turning to Asia, an Azerbaijani passenger plane with 67 people on board has crashed near the Kazakh city of Aktau. The plane was traveling from Baku to Grozny, Russia. The Kazakh Emergency Ministry says dozens of people are likely dead. Authorities say 28 people survived the incident. Algarim Kali has more from Astana.
An Azerbaijan Airlines passenger plane flying from Baku to Grozny crashed in Kazakhstan. The Embraer 190 plane was flying from Baku to Grozny and crashed near the Kazakh airport of the port city of Aktau. This is in the western region of Kazakhstan. There were 67 passengers and 5 crew members on board of the plane. Rescuers are already working at the scene of the accident. 52 personnel and 11 units of equipment from the Ministry of Emergency Situations of Kazakhstan arrived at the crash site in Aktau. Upon arrival, the aircraft was found to be on fire. At the moment, the fire is extinguished. Air ambulances headed to the crash site. The Health Minister Akmaral Al-Nazarova said that they prepared air ambulances for the departure and dispatch of specialists, among them traumatologists, neurosurgeons, and others, and provided assistance on site and evacuated people. So for now, 25 survivors were taken to the hospital. Among them, 37 citizens of Azerbaijan, 16 Russian, 6 citizens of Kazakhstan, and 3 of the Kyrgyzstan Republic.
That was Algarim Kali reporting. Finally, in Africa, Somalia has accused Ethiopian forces of a deadly attack on its troops in a border region. Ethiopia has denied any involvement. The two countries are now trying to resolve the issue. Muhammad Kahia has more from Mogadishu.
Somalia has blamed Ethiopian forces based at the border town of Doro for taking part in an attack that targeted bases manned by the Somali army, the police, and units from the intelligence agency. Unspecified number of people have been reported to have been harmed in this attack that also saw confrontations between the federal and regional forces from Jubaland state. The Ethiopian government has since denied the allegations by Somali government. A statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said the incident was instigated by elements that aim to derail the normalizations of relations between Mogadishu and Addis Ababa. The two countries were not in good terms since January last year, when Ethiopia signed an agreement with the breakaway region of Somaliland to build a port and naval base deal in its quest to access the Red Sea. After 3 rounds of talks through Turkish facilitations, President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed agreed to resolve their differences peacefully. A delegation from Somalia, led by State Minister for Foreign Affairs and the Director of the National Intelligence, are already in Addis Ababa to spearhead more talks between the two sides.
That was Muhammad Kahir reporting. Before we go, here's a recap of today's top stories. Israel says its negotiating team has returned from Qatar after having what it calls meaningful talks for a deal to release the hostages held in Gaza. Residents of a war-ravaged neighborhood in eastern Damascus are returning home to check the conditions of their houses. An Azerbaijani passenger plane with 67 people on board has crashed near the Kazakh city of Aktau. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports, and culture, you can subscribe to The Beijing Hour, a 1-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Do Hongyu. Thank you for listening.